I didn't realize Xavier was taking in animals. Even animals as unique as you.
Who are you?
Hear the music.
Warning ahead of time, this video may get just a little bit graphic. James Howlett, Logan, Weapon X, whatever you call him, Wolverine is one of the most visceral, ferocious, and infamous mutants in all of Marvel lore.
Ooh, shiny.
Whether in comic books, on television, or in films and video games, Wolverine consistently remains fierce, intemperate, and violent. Naturally, the iconic mutant and member of the X-Men possesses heightened feral senses, an adamantium-infused skeletal structure that includes claws, and an uncanny regenerative healing factor. Because of these abilities, Logan is a survivor in its purest form and has lived a long, long time. Because of all that, Wolverine has seen his fair share of scraps, and throughout all of the fracas and rumpus, Logan has unfortunately had to kill many a foe and friends. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the most powerful characters that Wolverine has defeated. The first entry on our list is an incredibly heart-wrenching and agonizing instance involving the love of Wolverine's life, his bride, MARIKO YASHIDA. I guarantee I'm mispronouncing that. I've only ever seen it written. I'm doing my best. The daughter of the notorious Japanese crime lord Shingen, who is also the leader of Clan Yashida, Mariko fell in love with Logan while visiting New York, but was forced by her father to marry his associate, Noboru Hideki. Thrust into a life of crime and assassinations, Mariko was no saint herself, and became quite a force in the seedy underworld of Japan. Perhaps this is why she and Logan were so compatible. Rival crime boss and leader of the Hand, Matsuo Tsuruyaba, would compromise her using a lethal poison drawn from a blowfish. Wishing to avoid prolonged suffering, Mariko asked her lover Wolverine to give her a quick death, instead of allowing her to suffer, which he reluctantly did so. Eventually, she would be resurrected by Gorgon to act as an enforcer, becoming the Scarlet Samurai. She would even go toe-to-toe with Old Man Logan. Although Wolverine never destroyed Mariko while she was in her most physically powerful form, her influence and weight as a gangster holds heavier than any average superhuman ability. Sticking with Wolverine's deep ties to Japan, Keniuchiyo Harada, a master in the disciplines of medieval samurai and kenjutsu, Harada, aka the Silver Samurai, would become a warrior for hire and possess the ability to generate tachyon energy fields from within his body. Working alongside Viper and Hydra, the Silver Samurai would use a teleportation ring and at one point wielded the legendary original Muramasa sword. In the film The Wolverine, the Silver Samurai was a nearly indestructible adamantium armor suit worn by Mariko's father in this universe, Ichiro Yashida. This suit was able to reverse its wearer's age, but Wolverine put a stop to it by slashing up the armor and tossing it off of a cliff, killing Ichiro in the process. Silver Samurai is still alive in the comics today, but when crossing paths with Wolverine as often as he has, it would be most wise to continue to tread lightly. Yet another relative of an insane and abusive Japanese kingpin, Yuriko Oyama, better known as Lady Deathstrike, is a cyborg with a self-repairing machine body and deadly adamantium claws. Lady Deathstrike would murder her own father before taking over his legacy and becoming obsessed with her hatred towards Wolverine. Deathstrike was primarily involved in tales surrounding Daredevil. During the events of the film X2 X-Men United, Lady Deathstrike was the mutant bodyguard of William Stryker. After aiding and luring Logan back to the Weapon X facilities, the two would do one-on-one battle to which Lady Deathstrike really held her own. However, it would be the feral X-Man who survived this encounter after injecting Deathstrike's body with hot, liquidized adamantium, painfully ending her life. Looking back at the comics, Wolverine and Lady Deathstrike have duked it out on several occasions, and she has actually witnessed the apparent demise of Logan on more than one occasion. Arkady Rosevich, aka Omega Red, is an extremely powerful and bloodthirsty mutant, who also went through the Russian super soldier program. Possessing similar regenerative healing capabilities as Wolverine, mixed with its duplicitous and treacherous nature, Omega Red is a fierce and problematic rival to both Wolverine and the X-Men in the comics. Two combatants so evenly matched, Wolverine and Omega Red once fought hand-to-hand for 17 hours straight. Capable of emitting lethal death spores from his body, Omega Red can also absorb the life force of humans. During one of his final battles with Wolverine, Omega Red's arrogance would get the better of him, and as he let his guard down, Logan would throw a fragment of the broken Muramasa sword through Omega Red's heart. On film, we've only seen Omega Red briefly as a fellow cellmate alongside Deadpool, prisoned inside of the icebox. Regardless, Wolverine can say that he has one-upped and ended Omega Red on at least one occasion. Mystique, commonly known by her assumed name Raven Darkholme, is a shape-shifting mutant terrorist and recurring villain often fighting against the X-Men. In both the movies and comic books, Mystique is a prominent, intriguing, and violent character, with a rich history that involves Wolverine. More so in the comics than in film, the pages depict Wolverine and Mystique as being passionate lovers, as well as bitter enemies. In one of these storylines, Mystique recruits Wolverine to assist her in robbing a bank. After reluctantly helping Mystique, the two would begin to hook up, before the shapeshifter and her gang turn their backs on Wolverine, abandoning him in the desert. Bummer. Sometime later, their bad blood would come to a head, and both Mystique and Wolverine would engage in a vicious battle, leaving Logan with a bullet in his head and Raven with mortal stab wounds. The X-Man would recover, but Darkholme would not, poetically being left to die in a hot desert. In another instance, during the first X-Men movie and one of their earliest encounters, Wolverine would plunge a claw into Mystique's stomach, leaving her for dead there as well, although it would later be revealed in the sequel that Mystique had survived the maiming. The mouse to his cat, the cat to his dog. Sabretooth is Wolverine's arch-nemesis and feline equivalent, who has been depicted as a friend, family member, and ferocious foe, depending on who's telling the story and in what medium. Also known by his birth name, Victor Creed, he and Wolverine have fought to and near death many times in both comic books and movies. A bestial mutant who has been artificially enhanced on multiple occasions, Sabretooth possesses sharp teeth and fangs, superhuman senses, and, you guessed it, a regenerative healing factor akin to Wolverine. Creed genuinely hates Logan so much that for years in the comics, he would locate Wolverine every year on his birthday and attempt to beat the X-Man to death. One year, however, things would change, as Logan had anticipated his foe's arrival and awaited Creed with the Muramasa blade in one hand. After a bloody battle, Wolverine would decapitate Sabretooth, putting an end to their rivalry once and for all. Chronologically in cinema, the last time that we've seen Sabretooth was during the final battle in the first X-Men movie, where he was blasted by one of Cyclops' devastating optical beams, although it is unknown if this blow terminated Sabretooth or not. Wade Wilson, the Merc with the Mouth, the infallible anti-hero and sometimes X-Man.
Trainee!
Shut it!
Deadpool is very familiar with Wolverine in both Marvel Comics and movies, with a titular team-up series of comics in the early 2000s titled, well, Wolverine and Deadpool. The two mutants have fought alongside each other more often than not during their comic book adventures. In the movies, however, that's a whole other story. Originally crossing paths in the film X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is largely considered one of the worst X-Men movies ever made, due to this specific reason. Deadpool, played by Ryan Reynolds, was a twirly, handsome assassin who was transformed into a monstrous, alien-like kung fu, laser beam shooting, abomination, and, quite frankly, travesty. Luckily, Wolverine, portrayed by Hugh Jackman, would sever the head of this revolting excuse for a character and thankfully put an end to that brutal interpretation of Deadpool. There was a deleted scene that would see Deadpool open his eyes, revealing that he was potentially still alive, but fear not. When Ryan Reynolds got the chance to revitalize the character in his own Deadpool movie years later, he would break the fourth wall, taking the new Deadpool back into the Origins movie, killing the old version of himself once more. With Hugh Jackman set to reprise his iconic role as Wolverine in the MCU official movie Deadpool 3, this first installment of the trilogy made under the Marvel Studios banner, as revealed in a couple of hilarious teaser trailers, I cannot wait to hear the banter and jokes aimed at each other and their terrible first cinematic encounter. If you thought we were finished with Wolverine's historical ties to Japan, guess again! In fact, Logan's bond with the land of the rising sun is much more vast and deeply rooted than most people realize. Not only did the adamantium reinforced mutant marry the previously mentioned Scarlet Samurai, but in the 1940s, Logan had married another Japanese woman. Furthermore, Wolverine and that woman would go on to have a son, who would eventually adopt the name DAKEN. Corrupted since his youth by the powerful and alleged lupus sapien known as Romulus, DAKEN was influenced into hating his father, believing Logan to be the one responsible for the death of his mother. An exceptional mutant, possessing virtually identical powers to his father, DAKEN, currently known as Fang in the comics, would take on the mantle of Dark Wolverine while hunting down his father. After coming to blows for the final time, Wolverine would beat up and dispatch his boy, apologizing for never being there for him, before drowning and killing DAKEN once and for all. Kind of, it's comics, of course he came back. The next entry on our list covers one of the most tragic and simple tales ever told involving Wolverine. On Earth 1610, otherwise known as Marvel's Ultimate Universe, a teenage boy, simply known as Jay, had his entire life fall apart one fateful day. Waking up one morning, Jay would slowly realize that something was terribly wrong. With his mother oddly not present in his home and the scarcity of active people outside of his neighborhood, Jay would eventually shake off his feeling of unrest once arriving at school and seeing his girlfriend. However, terrifyingly and out of nowhere, all of the students surrounding Jay, including his girlfriend, started burning up and melting all around him. As it turns out, Jay was a very powerful and dangerous mutant who uncontrollably radiated toxins, capable of vaporizing people from the inside out. Realizing he had accidentally killed 265 people, Jay would hide out in a cave of sorts before being confronted by Wolverine, who informed the young mutant that no one would ever find out it was him who caused this tragedy, and it would be blamed on a chemical leak. Logan would spend the night consoling the boy, but come the next morning, Wolverine would exit the cave alone, implying, well, you know, an utter tragedy to say the least. When thinking of uncanny and dynamic Marvel mutants, MOIRA MACTAGGERT, or MOIRA X as she's come to be known, is not a character that typically comes to mind. However, in recent years it has been revealed that the brilliant geneticist is also a powerful, undetectable, and nigh immortal mutant. Capable of reincarnation, it is now known that MOIRA MACTAGGERT has lived 10 or so lives thus far, all throughout Marvel's illustrious history. During a story arc where Wolverine travels back in time to kill Moira in her 9th life, as she was responsible for the Sentinels taking over the world in his future, it is Moira who ultimately requests that Wolverine kill her with a blade to bring about her 10th life. We all know the story at this point. Dr. Bruce Banner got hit with a gamma radiation blast and became the Incredible Hulk. With unbridled limitations in strength, which is heightened when angry or enraged, the Hulk's power level has on occasion been described as godlike. In an alternate universe where Hulk and his cousin She-Hulk moved to the West Coast in order to start a family and community of their own, their offspring and grandchildren grew up to be hillbillies, forming the Hulk Gang. Murderous and violent, the Hulk Gang killed many people over the years with nobody seemingly capable of stopping them. When this gang of green giants unknowingly kill Old Man Logan's family, however, they ultimately meet their match in the feral mutant. After killing Hulk's grandkids and kin, Wolverine is confronted by Hulk and the two do battle. The Hulk would beat down Logan before eating and swallowing him whole. That would be a pivotal mistake, as Wolverine would regenerate inside of Hulk's body, slashing and eviscerating the green giant from the inside out, definitively killing one of Wolverine's mightiest and most long-running foes. Uncanny mutant telepath, OG member of the X-Men, and often host of the almighty Phoenix Force, Jean Grey has had a complicated relationship with Wolverine, both in comic books and movies alike. When most fans think of Jean Grey and her love life, they usually think of her eventual husband Scott Summers first. However, Marvel Girl has always had underlying feels for Wolverine, with Jean even being described as the love of Logan's life. Nobody tell the Scarlet Samurai that. Due to the nature of Jean's incredible and sometimes uncontrollable Omega-level mutant powers, in addition to the Phoenix Force compelling her, she often finds herself standing on the wrong side of the X-Men. Fighting Jean Grey many times throughout Marvel history, Wolverine has also unfortunately had to kill the redhead more times than he probably cares to count. In the comics, Wolverine has felt the need to take Jean out on 2 occasions, both in order to stop the telepath from suffering. One time the two were hurtling into the sun and Jean was in pain, so Wolverine impaled her moments before they disintegrated. Another time, Jean had caused so much destruction as the Phoenix that she begged Logan to kill her to stop the despair. Tragically, the Phoenix kept instantly reincarnating itself along with Jean's body, forcing Wolverine to end her 6 times before all was said and done. Most famously, during the film X-Men The Last Stand, Wolverine would have to reluctantly kill Jean, again as she was possessed by the Phoenix Force. What do all these deaths have in common? In each scenario, Wolverine snicked his low-key love in the abdomen to put a stop to her madness. Magneto is one of the most iconic supervillains and mutant in all of Marvel. Recently confirmed as an Omega-level mutant and capable of manipulating all metals, Magneto fighting Wolverine on paper is a bit of a mismatch. Of course, Wolverine's skeletal structure is amalgamated with adamantium, the hardest known metal in the entire universe. Because of this, Magneto has been able to stifle Weapon X on many occasions. In one instance, Magneto even ripped the metal out of Logan's body, brutally maiming the X-Men alumni in the process. During the Eve of Destruction story arc, mutants were plagued with the Legacy virus, as Magneto assembled an army and declared war on humankind. In an effort to thwart Magneto's plans, Cyclops and Wolverine went to Genosha and were able to knock Magneto's helmet off, allowing Professor X to prevent his frenemy from using his powers. At that time, Wolverine does what he says Xavier will not and stabs Magneto clean in the chest, nearly killing him instantaneously. Yes, you're hearing me correctly, and no, this isn't some kind of sick, twisted joke. Well, at least on my end it isn't. During the Age of Ultron storyline in the comics, in order to prevent the demise of Earth, Wolverine travels back in time to attempt to assassinate Hank Pym before he ever created Ultron in the first place. Logan would be successful in dispatching of Dr. Pym and returning to his timeline, only to discover that Pym dying made everything worse. Deciding to travel back in time once more in order to prevent himself from killing Pym, Wolverine was successful in persuading himself. However, the Weapon X variant, hearing of the volatile destruction in his imminent future, decided that he can no longer continue in life and asked the main timeline version of himself to, well, take himself out. So, you know, he's on his own list. Hope that makes sense. Again, not a joke, but a real and totally legit entry on this list. Not only has Wolverine been able to single-claw-handedly wipe out every superhero and villain in Marvel, but in another universe, Old Man Logan has even slaughtered the entire X-Men roster. As seen in the comic book What If, Enemy of the State, Hydra in the Hand brainwashed Logan, tasking him with killing basically every character in the entire universe. In another universe, the villains of Earth teamed up to try to wipe out the heroes on Earth, and seemingly, they attacked Xavier Mansion. Wolverine, seeing that the place was besieged by a plethora of villains, proceeded to slash his way through them brutally. It turns out, however, that Mysterio was casting an illusion on Wolverine, and he accidentally decimated every student and X-Men at the school. That's a big yikes. And that's our list. Did we miss any? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for more Metal Claw comic content.